Hey gang, wanted to tell you about Amazon Music Unlimited, a premium music subscription service featuring over 70 million songs and thousands of expert program playlists and stations and podcasts, including mine. You guys can get a free trial right now. Go to getamazonmusic.com/UncleJoshTrueScaryStories. I use it every single day. For whatever reason, I have been into an 80s hip-hop mode, so I've been listening to everything from Beastie Boys, BDP, Kool Moe Dee, you name it, it is there. Over 70 million songs and podcasts. Go check it out right now. And it doesn't matter whatever device you're working off of. A tablet, PC, Mac, Fire TV, Alexa-enabled devices, Amazon Echo, you name it. You can have access. Go get your free trial right now. GetAmazonMusic.com/UncleJoshTrueScaryStories. And without any further ado, Campfire crew, let's get it on. Brutality, submitted by Skinny Legs. The names in this story have all been changed. I hope that's okay. I grew up in a really rough neighborhood in Chicago. Lots of violence, lots of fights, gunshots every night. South Side. And if you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. My mom left my dad, or rather, my dad told my mom to pack her shit after years of dealing with her inability to come to grips with her mental issues. Even after talking with her about it, I don't know what happened. She just kind of snapped, went into a depression, and never came out of it. She neglected me and my two sisters. I'm a female, by the way. And Dad was tired of coming home to find us ignored while my mom just sat smoking cigarettes, watching game shows, or talking on the phone. I was 13 at the time. My older sister Zara was 17 and took care of us a lot, and my baby girl Zoe was 6. After Zoe, that's when my mom just lost it. I don't know if it was postpartum or what, but Zara and I would come home from school to find Zoe basically abandoned. She was fed and stuff, but we could tell that Mom was not paying any attention to her. She also stopped having any interest in me and my sister's activities or school stuff. She just kind of shut off. Dad said, nope, got a divorce, got custody of all 3 of us. Mom didn't even contest, but they had to split the house, and we had to move to a different neighborhood. I basically grew up for the next 3 years in the hell that North Lawndale is. Dad was working 2 jobs, busting it for us, hoping to get out of where we were. Zara was working as well, and I was in charge of making meals, taking care of Zoe, and getting the 2 of us to school. Some days after school, I would take Zoe to the park to play before getting home to make dinner. That's when I met this kid named Nicky. He was a thug, straight up. He was a drug dealer, and I knew that. He came over to me as I was watching Zoe play with some of her friends, and he started talking. Charming as all hell, and I liked him even knowing he was not a very good person. He was 14, and to be truthful, he was gorgeous, but I knew what he was doing was wrong. He never once asked me to do drugs or anything like that, never offered to sell me any, but he took a liking to me, and every time I was at the park, he came over and sat with me and told me I shouldn't be down here with my sister. He began walking me home to make sure I got there okay, and that was the first time I ever saw a gun. While we were walking, my hand holding Zoe's, his jacket kind of bunched up, and I saw the gun in his waistband. It took me 2 days and no Zoe to ask him why he had it. He just said protection. Every day we left the park, Nicky walked us home. My dad got wind of it and told me to stay away from him, and like the good girl I was, I did and stopped going to the park. For the most part. Now here's the scary part. One of his friends followed us home one day. I'll call him Shorty because that's what they all called him. On a night that my dad had to work a double and Zara was at work too, Shorty knocked on the front door and asked to come in. I opened the door with the chain thing on it and told him no. He then started smashing his hands on the door, yelling to let him in. And I just yelled out that I was going to tell Nicky, and he went away. But he kept following me. I would leave school and see him off in the distance watching me, at night out in the street looking up at my house, and more than once I told my dad or Zara when they came home, and they'd have to go out and yell at him to go away. One day, against my dad's wishes, I was at the park with just me and my friend Sissy, and I saw Nicky. I told him what was going on, and he said he'd take care of it. He actually gave me his cell number and told me to text him if anything bad happened. And in a strange way, even though I knew he was bad news, it made me feel better. My dad would have killed me had he known I did this, and later on he did get mad. One night, I was asleep and there was a sound at my window. My bedroom was on the first floor. Someone was trying to force the window open. I got up and looked out. It was Shorty trying to pry the window with a screwdriver. I screamed. Zara came running in and he took off. 2 days later, right at the end of school, he showed up and tried to take my backpack. I was going over to get Zoe, and he came out of nowhere and grabbed my bag and yelled, "Come with me!" I screamed, and some bus people heard me, and some other teachers came running over, and he took off. They called my dad, and he got off of work to come get me and Zoe, and he had a surprise. He was getting a big promotion, was only going to be working one shift from now on, and we were moving. I was so excited. So were Zoe and Zara. During that summer, we were packing to move to a town called LaGrange Park, and I went back to the park with my friends one afternoon, again against my dad's wishes. I saw Nicky and told him what was going on, and he said he was so happy that we didn't need to be here anymore. For a drug dealer and a thug, he had a heart of gold. However, Shorty was not too far away and must have heard everything I said. And even as a kid, I didn't know why he wanted to be around me, and I told Nicky about the last time he tried to break in. Nicky immediately jumped up and began to beat the snot out of Shorty, yelling at him to leave me alone once and for all. I just cried and ran away. I'd never seen anyone getting beat up like that. We finally moved and everything was great. Zoe and I started new schools, Zara was going to college, and it was just such a better place to live. But one night, Dad went out to a meeting for some board that he had joined, and I was watching Zoe. We were just watching TV and eating some snacks when I heard someone outside. At first I thought, it's just one of the neighbors. But then there was a scratching at a window, and it made me think of the time Shorty tried to pry open my window. I got up and went into our dining room, and there was a shape outside. Someone was trying to get in. I yelled for them to get away, and he did. I don't think I need to tell you it was Shorty, and I called my dad right away. He told me he was on his way and that I should also call the police. Shorty kept trying to get into every window, every door, banging on the entire outside of the house. My neighbors came out and yelled at him to leave, and he did. Dad got home before the police, and I was just hiding in the living room holding Zoe. I told them everything, and everything about Shorty, too. The police took a report, told us they'd keep an eye on things, and then left. We went to bed totally shaken, and I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to get a glass of water, and there in the kitchen window, staring in, was Shorty. I didn't turn the lights on, and I knew he couldn't see me. Terrified, I didn't know why, but I backed out of the room and texted Nicky and told him that Shorty was at my house. He asked where I was, and I told him, and he just texted back one letter. K. I was afraid to move. Shorty was still trying to get in, but I didn't want him to see me. I texted my dad, and he came down like thunder and ripped open the back door and told the guy to get the F out. And Shorty took off. Dad called the police again, and they finally arrived and then left. About an hour later, we heard loud bangs from down the street, something I was used to back in my old neighborhood, but not out here. I heard a car zooming away, and a few minutes later, a whole lot of police cars. Everyone in the neighborhood had come out to see what was going on. It sounded like the 4th of July. A bunch of us walked down to see what had happened, and there was a body in the street. It was Shorty. My dad realized I was with him, and he immediately scooped me up and took me home. Even though it was a dead body, I wasn't scared or anything. We went home. Dad made me some hot chocolate, even though it wasn't cold out, and he sat holding my hand. I finally fell asleep, but the next morning there was a text on my phone from Nikki. It just said, "Stay out of trouble. Bye." I tried to text and call, but I had been blocked. I never saw or heard from Nikki again, but I'm sure he was the one who did what happened to Shorty. I wasn't and still am not sure how to feel about that. Someone who was so-called protecting me also killed someone. It's a little messed up, to say the least. I never told my dad about what I thought had happened and still haven't, but I did eventually tell him that I did give Nikki my phone number. He was not happy about that, but that's water under the bridge. I'm not sure if I should be thankful or terrified that someone that close to me could kill someone else at the drop of a hat. Kinda scary. Cyber Stalker Found Me by 45 Minutes of Roadhead. 6 years ago, I was a new mom, learning to balance my job, family, and health. My social life primarily existed on the internet at this time, and Facebook and Instagram were the main ways I kept in contact with others. I received a friend request from Steven, an old friend from high school. I accepted, and everything was normal for a while. After a couple of months, Steven sent a DM asking how I was. The conversation was fine, but it didn't take too long for me to realize that this wasn't the Steven I knew. They had the same first and common last name. His profile picture was not a picture of himself, so I never realized that this was a different person. Either way, we had several mutual friends, and he didn't do anything especially creepy, so I left him on my friends list. He would occasionally message and chat, and he seemed just like someone that was a bit socially awkward but harmless. I would respond, but kept the conversations brief. One day, I got a text from him, which surprised me because I never gave him my number. I asked how he got my number, and he said from my website, which was fair. I'm an artist and had an email and phone contact info on my art site. He began texting several times a day, and I would give short responses followed with something like, "At work, TTYL," or "Dinner with the fam, have a good evening." He started talking about his new boyfriend, saying that he was one of the few gay conservatives and things were going well. I told him I was glad he had a partner that aligned with him and wished him well. He then began talking a lot about conservative politics and was aggressive about it. And I told him I was liberal, so it was probably best we didn't have these conversations. His messages began turning sexual, where he would ask if I wanted to hear about the sex parties he and his boyfriend threw. I told him no. I didn't really know him, and it was inappropriate. One day, I was busy with work and returned to my phone to see dozens of messages from him, angry that I wasn't responding, and he went on and on sharing very graphic sexual stories. I responded and told him I had been polite to him because he seemed like he didn't have many friends, but this was too much, and I was blocking him. I told him that I didn't believe he was gay and that he was just saying it in an attempt to make me think he was harmless. I proceeded to block him on social media, and I blocked his phone number. A couple of days later, I started getting lots of friend requests from accounts that I didn't have mutual friends with, and no friends. I knew they were probably fake pages that he was creating. I would just block them and move on. Then I began getting phone calls and texts from fake phone numbers. Same thing. I would block them and move on. I messaged our mutuals to ask what they knew about him, and none of them knew him. He had just requested them and they had accepted. He began sending requests to my friends, family, and any other woman in my dance troupe. I let everyone know that they needed to block him. For months, not a day passed that I did not get a weird call or friend request or DM. It would range from a normal, "How are you?" to vague threats of, "I could make you talk to me if I really wanted to." He lived several hours away, so I wasn't particularly concerned. Things got quieter until one evening my notifications started going off like crazy and my phone was ringing with unknown numbers. It was on my art page. Probably 15 different accounts had posted porn on my page or things like "OP is a whore" or "OP is a thief." I knew it was him because he also accidentally posted from his real account, and I didn't realize that I never blocked him from that page. He also sent a message to my art page saying sorry for that and he missed his friend and was just trying to get my attention. I didn't respond, blocked him, and called the police, since stalking and harassment laws are awful. Even though stalking and harassment laws are awful, they didn't do anything. Later that night, I woke up around 2 a.m. for no reason other than I was just having trouble sleeping, and I was up for a while playing on my phone when I started hearing a strange sound coming from the living room. It was back and forth between quiet cracking and scratching. At the time, we lived in a large ranch house, and the living room was at the other end of a long hall. I got up, thinking that my cats were into something or maybe after a mouse. I flipped on the living room light, and the sound stopped. I scanned around looking for my cats when I noticed an open window. Our windows were large, from floor to ceiling, and opened by pulling them down from the top. The top of the windowsill had pry marks, and the lock was broken. Thankfully, this house was old, and the windows did not open easily, and he had only been able to open it by about 8 inches. I woke up my husband, got my son out of his room, and called the police. I knew it was Stephen. It was too big of a coincidence that he blew up that day, and then someone tried to break into my house in the middle of the night. We couldn't prove it was him. There was no evidence other than what had happened the day that pointed to him. The police spoke to him, and I believe that it scared him enough to leave me alone. I was obviously horrified at the time and began looking up anything I could to find out about him. I wound up finding his YouTube channel, which solidified my fears even more. He posted Rush Limbaugh-style rants and would get angrier and angrier until he was red-faced and nearly spitting. He frequently talked about violence and would show off his gun collection. This led me to finding his real last name. I Googled his name and found that he had been arrested 2 years prior for holding a woman against her will in a hotel and attempting to assault her. Thankfully, she was able to escape only with a bloody lip. We moved not long after. I wanted neighbors and off of the farm. I removed my phone number from my site, and I locked down all of my social media. I still sleep with a baby monitor in my son's room because I'm so scared of someone coming in at night. His YouTube channel was shut down after a bit, and I haven't heard from him since. So, Stephen, I hope you wound up in jail, and let's not meet. Independence Day Discovery by Small Town Throwaway. I live in a small, rural community in the eastern U.S. It's a nice little town. Because of my work in the medical field, I've met some interesting folks. I'm also familiar with law enforcement and emergency personnel. Small town life is not as dull and uneventful as people think, especially since everybody knows somebody who knows somebody. I have a lot of stories to share, but since this one just happened, I'll start here. Because it's still very recent and the investigation is ongoing, I have to be vague with some details, but I needed to tell someone. I'm single and live alone. Due to a stalker, I've moved twice, but that's another story for another time. However, it is relevant for this story for multiple reasons. The first reason being that I have a dog for the sake of protection, as well as have motion sensors and outdoor security cameras. The second reason being the location of my home, which is literally down the street from the fire department. I can see it from my living room window, and a couple of blocks from the police station. However, next to the fire department is the road department, which is basically a parking lot where they park their road equipment and empty garbage trucks at night and on weekends. Oddly, it doesn't have a security camera. Small town life, I suppose. My house sits on a hill with a good view of that side of the street. Due to the incline, the large trees in the front yard, and the half cornfield on the property next to me, most people on the street below wouldn't notice me in the backyard unless they were actively looking. However, I can see the street clearly. This incident happened Saturday evening. The county was holding its annual Independence Day spiel with a community barbecue, music, fireworks, etc. I didn't attend because it's not my thing. Plus, I have a dog and the sound of fireworks could be traumatizing. Before the big show, I took the dog out to relieve herself in the backyard. There was at least an hour of daylight, but the entire neighborhood was pretty quiet because most everyone was at the fairgrounds or various other holiday events. So when an unfamiliar, large, white pickup drove slowly down the street, I noticed. It must have turned around at the end of the street because I saw it again moving in the opposite direction, only about 20 seconds later. This time, it turned into the parking lot of the road department. Now, people have been known to toss things into the empty garbage trucks, usually at night to avoid getting caught, because they don't want to or are unable to make the trip to the landfill themselves. Usually it's things like furniture or broken equipment, but I didn't see any of those things in the back of this truck. The driver was a somewhat stocky guy of average height. He took 3 large black trash bags from the bed of his truck and tossed them one by one into the hopper of the garbage truck, and then he left. Now, I swear, I'm not one of those meddling rear window types who always thinks activity is suspicious and that their neighbors are up to no good. But something about this didn't sit right with me. Normally, when I see people tossing their garbage into the trucks and leaving, I don't bother reporting it because it's relatively harmless. But this time, I had a gut feeling. So I called the police. I mean, if anything, they could get the guy for illegally dumping trash from a barbecue or whatever. While I was on the phone with dispatch, I put my dog inside to cut down on distractions while the officers investigated. A few minutes later, an officer arrived, and I crossed the street to meet him, gave him a description of the events, and pointed out which one of the trucks the man had tossed the bags. He found the bags. He took photos. He put on gloves and told me to stay back. The bags were tied in a knot at the top, and it took him a minute to untie one because of the gloves and how tight the knot was, but eventually he got it open. He looked inside for a few seconds, then twisted it closed and took a few steps back. "Shit," he hissed under his breath. "What?" I asked. "It's a body." I felt sick. I could tell he felt sick too. I saw him grow pale. His hand was trembling while he held the radio, and even his voice was shaking as he gave the code to dispatch. The dispatcher sounded confused when she asked him to repeat it. Within 10 minutes, the county sheriff was on the scene. Even he looked sick at the contents of the bag. The coroner arrived about 10 minutes after that, and the first officer walked me back to the house along with another one who had arrived at the same time as the coroner. Though I showed the first cop via the app on my phone when I described the events initially, I now showed them the video on a larger screen. The camera caught footage of the truck as it drove by both times, as well as pulling into the parking lot, though unfortunately not a clear view of the license plate or the man tossing the bags out of frame. We watched the footage over and over, pausing frames, and the officers taking notes. Ultimately, they requested this footage as well as a copy of the files from the past week to see if the truck had been in the area before. I've also been saving footage until the road department installs their own camera this week. Because this is still fresh, I don't know many more details. I know the body was in pieces, but I don't know the age of the victim, the gender, cause of death, any of that. Information hasn't been released to the public. I don't know if the coroner has ever been able to identify the body. A police cruiser has been parked at the fire department next door for constant surveillance in case the guy comes back. The guy who dumped the body was likely a local. I mean, how else would he know that he could dump there? He probably thought it'd get buried in other people's illegal trash accumulated over the holiday weekend, and a sanitation crew wouldn't have bothered to investigate. When I think about how this guy lives in my community, it makes me physically ill. To think that he had clearly scouted the area for a dump site, that it might not have been the first time that this had happened, that this could happen again. If I hadn't called it in, if I hadn't been in the backyard at that exact moment, or if I had ignored that gut feeling, the victim would have never been found and may never find potential justice. Their loved ones may never have closure. In fact, there's a possibility that it just might happen again to another poor soul. I hope it's not me. Dear God, please don't let it be me. I think it's time I moved again. Third time's the charm, right? Something followed us, submitted by The Red Fern Grows Here. I've never told anyone about this. This is really the first time I'm sharing it because I never thought anyone would believe me other than my friend and my parents who witnessed it. A couple of years back, I was 18 and living in a town in Nebraska in the middle of nowhere. It was on the edge of South Dakota. I used to like to walk with my best friend Carrie at night to talk and think about things that were coming up for us in our future. Sometimes we also liked to smoke a little weed. We were also kind of breaking the law some nights when we went to a nearby golf course to walk around, smoke, and talk. After the golf course, there was nothing else out there for miles around. To the north of our town was a reservation, but that was in South Dakota, a little ways away. There was nothing much else up there in our state as far as buildings or people. One night, Carrie and I were on one of our late-night walks, sharing a J and talking about going to college and getting out of our little podunk town. We sat down on a bench at one of the holes on the golf course and were just enjoying the evening. I remember it being kind of humid and sweating a little bit, and I think back and wonder if that's what attracted what came about. Or maybe it was just the scent of the weed we were smoking, I don't know. But as we sat there talking, I heard a noise from some trees and bushes along the golf course hole that we were on. I grabbed Carrie's arm and said, "Do you hear that?" Whatever it was, it sounded really big, and at first I thought maybe it was the owner or someone else coming out to kick us off because we really shouldn't have been out there. Carrie said, "No, I don't hear anything." So we sat listening, and then we heard the noise again. It was something walking behind the trees. We looked as hard as we could, and as there was a full moon, we could see a lot of our surroundings, but as anyone knows, everything is deceiving at night when you can't see every single thing that's there. We were quiet, and I stubbed out the J on the ground. And that's when we heard this loud grunting noise coming from the trees that we had been staring at. In short time, something came out of the trees. And this is not a Bigfoot story. I've seen a lot of those shows and watched all those movies about people saying that they saw Bigfoot, but whatever this thing was, it was not that. It was tall and covered with hair, but it was very thin and looked like a hairy version of the Slender Man. I know that sounds cheesy, but it's true, and it's the best way I can describe this thing. It was very dark with either black or brown hair, but we obviously couldn't tell in the moonlight. For a few seconds, it just looked at us, and we looked at it. And then it let out this terribly loud howl, scream, however you want to think about it. It was kind of a mixture of both. It started to move towards us quickly, and I grabbed Carrie and just yelled, "Run!" We tore out of there and got back to the street and kept running. All the while we could hear whatever this thing was pounding its feet, whether it was on the grass or on the pavement, but it was right behind us. I'm sure it could have overtaken us, but for whatever reason, it didn't. It just kept up the same pace that we were putting down. We ran and ran and ran and got to my house and went in. My parents weren't home, so we just shut the door, locked it, and ran into my room. We were shaking and on the edge of tears, wondering what the heck this thing was. Then I got up my courage to look out of my bedroom window, and at the edge of our yard, there stood this thing. It had its arms raised out side to side like it was going to give my house a hug, and it started walking towards my window, and obviously it must have noticed that I was looking out. Carrie asked what I was looking at, and she came over and stood by my side. By this time, the thing had come right up to my window, and it was so tall we were actually just looking at its chest. Then it bent down and put its face right into the window in front of us. All I remember is that it had these big yellow eyes and big yellow teeth, and it just screamed into our faces through the screen. I hadn't even thought to put the window sash down, so there was just a screen there between us. Carrie and I fell backwards in utter horror. My dog, a German Shepherd, came running into the room and jumped at the thing and started ripping the screen apart. This giant beast, for lack of a better term, stood for another moment and then turned around and walked off my yard and into the trees. Carrie and I were crying and holding each other with my dog circling us and barking like he always did when he felt he had to protect someone. I tried calling my mom to let her know what was going on, but she didn't answer her phone, and neither did my dad. They were at some kind of event for her job. I threw the window down even though it was hot and humid, and I told Carrie we should just go into the living room where the only air conditioner in our house was. We tried to calm each other down, but we kept talking about what that thing out there was and if it was actually going to go away. Couldn't figure it out. Carrie said we should just watch Finding Bigfoot to see if that's what it was we were looking at, so we did, and it wasn't. This thing was way too tall, its arms were way too long, and it didn't look like a giant gorilla or a bear. It looked like an extremely tall human with a lot of long hair and those giant teeth and arms. Eventually we calmed down. I made some popcorn and we watched a couple of Disney movies before my parents got home. When they did, I let them know that Carrie was going to stay with us and that her parents were okay with it if they were. Of course, they didn't care. They were more than a few sheets to the wind from the event they had just come back from. My parents went to bed, and Carrie and I eventually went back to my room. It was about 3:45 in the morning when I heard a tapping at my window. I'd left it open a crack because it was hotter than heck in my room, and I had turned 2 fans on to try to keep us a little cool. The night air coming in felt good, but it was still very warm. At first I thought the tapping was something wrong with the fan that was nearest to the window, and in my waking slumber I completely forgot about the thing that we had seen earlier that night. But I remembered very quickly when I got to the fan near the window and saw the thing staring in at me. I screamed. Carrie woke up and looked over to me and also started screaming. My dog immediately jumped up at the window and did the same thing he was doing before. My dad came blasting through the door asking what the hell was going on, and we just kept screaming and pointing. He looked up and saw the thing and told us to get under my bed, and he ran to get his shotgun and went outside despite us pleading for him to not go out there. By now my mom had also woken up and came into the room with us asking what was going on. "What's happening, you guys? What are you doing?" Then we heard one shot from my dad's shotgun out in the yard and him yelling, "Get the hell out of here, whoever you are!" We heard this thing, beast, whatever you want to call it, do its howl scream again, and we heard it running away. It was so loud, even though we were under my bed, we could hear it running away. It never came back. My dad came in and told us that everything was going to be fine. He told me and Carrie to sleep in the living room where the air conditioner was and that he would take care of everything else. I didn't know what he meant by that at the time, but looking back, I think he meant he was going to stay up all night to make sure that nothing bad happened to us. The next day, we woke up and talked about it, and my dad said that he had seen exactly what we told him we had seen, so we knew that we weren't crazy. My mom never saw any of it and questioned what exactly had happened, but believed us because it was 3 against 1, plus my dog. To this day, I have no idea what that thing was. And it never came back, but I will have the vision of that creature etched in my mind for the rest of my life. College Basketball Creeps by Togpie77. I've never shared this story with anyone. I was always too afraid to be judged for it, so it's something I buried down until my friend brought it up the other day. We both have daughters, and we're talking about how we could educate them on being safe when they are teenagers and experimenting with partying. When my best friend and I were 17 years old, we went to the beach for spring break with a couple of our guy friends. My friend was talking to this guy she had met through mutual friends, and he wanted us to meet up with him at a house that he and his friends had rented together. Our guy friends had ditched us to meet girls, so we decided to go ahead and go to her friend's house to hang out with them. When we got there, it was the middle of the day, and he took us inside and introduced us to everyone. Turns out, almost all the guys were on a basketball team of the same university. We all hung out and they were all drinking. My friend and I were not. One guy came out with 2 glasses of what appeared to be whiskey and coke. And against my better judgment, I started to sip it, as did my friend. There was one guy who appeared to not be athletic, and he was the only person at the house who was not friendly towards us. I'll call him Mike. Suddenly, I started to feel very buzzed. We were laughing and talking, and one guy asked me to put on his jersey. I grabbed it and put it on over my clothes. "No, take off your clothes and put it on," he said in an aggressive tone. I was feeling more tipsy at this point, and I knew something was very wrong. Our parents had let us drink with them multiple times, I knew what it was like to be drunk. I knew how much I could handle before I was drunk, and one drink never made me feel like I was getting wasted. "Quit babysitting that drink. Drink up, weakling," one guy said, and everyone laughed. Even though I had stopped drinking, I could still feel more and more buzzed, especially since our drink barely tasted of any whiskey. My dad always had whiskey at home, and we would drink a couple whiskey Pepsis on occasion. I would feel relaxed, but this was much different. "We should go. Our friends are waiting for us," I said, and headed for the door, and a couple of guys stood in front of us. No, you can't leave. Come sit down over here for a little bit," as they ushered us back to the couch. This sinking feeling hit my gut, and I knew we were on borrowed time. Trying to stay calm, I laughed and said, "I need to pee. Come with me." I grabbed my friend's hand, and we went to the restroom together. We both stood there, and we had already read each other's minds. I put my hands on her head and looked her in the eyes so we could both focus. "We need to leave now," I said. Our phones both had spotty service all over the island, I'm guessing because there was so many people packed on it. I said, "Take my keys, tell them you're going to get your purse, and I'll stay here. You go get the guys and come back for me." As I opened the door, Mike was standing there. My heart sank. He was rude to us earlier, and he probably heard us talking. Instead, he said, "Follow me and be quiet." Something inside me trusted him with everything I had in that moment. We followed him down the hallway to a garage and out to the front driveway. "Hurry up, get out of here now," he said. We ran to the car and I drove off to our hotel. I remember driving, but I don't remember getting to our condo. The rest of the story is from our guys' friends telling us what happened. Apparently, we walked in, and the guys asked us where we had been because it was already nighttime and we were supposed to meet up to barbecue some weenies. They said we didn't say a word, just walked to our room and closed the door and passed out. We didn't come to until the next day, and both of us had excruciating headaches, as if we had drunk a whole bottle of cheap vodka by ourselves. To the basketball douchebags who tried to take advantage of two teenage girls, let's never meet again, or I will kick you in the dick. And thank you, Mike. I hope you're out there hearing this, and you remember the brunette and blonde little girls you saved that day on the island. The Perfect Night by Aratina A. It was late summer, and my teenage friends N, female, O, male, and I, also a female, went out on a Saturday night to a dance club on Hollywood Boulevard. We had a perfect night, danced our 18-year-old butts off, and at about 1:30 or 2 a.m., we headed out of the club to O's car since he drove us all to the club. O's car was parked 1 block south of Hollywood Boulevard, right across the street from Hollywood High School. As we were walking to his car, we heard many footsteps behind us. We turned around and saw about 6 or 7 guys walking kind of fast behind us. I figured, they're probably going to their car, until I heard the footsteps getting faster and closer. N started running towards O's car, which was in sight now. O and I didn't have to be told to run. We followed N, and all 3 of us were eventually running as fast as we could because at this point we realized those guys were coming after us. N got to the car first, and luckily she had left the back door unlocked, so she got inside the back seat and opened the front passenger door for me. I hurriedly got inside and slammed the little button down, locking my door. As I looked over to him, O was unlocking his door, got inside, but before he had a chance to close the door, one of the guys grabbed it and flung it open. He and another guy started punching O in the face while the other guys were trying to open my door and N's door all the while, screaming at us, "Open the effing door, bitch!" and banging on the car windows. We were so frightened, crying, screaming, crouching down, and praying that they wouldn't get to us. Lucky for O and for all of us, a group of people turned the corner and started walking down the street we were on, upon which our attackers abruptly stopped and ran away. Also, luckily, because they weren't able to drag O out of the driver's seat, they couldn't really get a good angle when punching him, so the punches weren't that all damaging. After they ran away, I was able to finally really look at O, and with horror and despite the darkness, saw his face was covered in blood. I was shaking, crying, laughing, crying, laughing. It was the weirdest reaction, but I couldn't stop it. I had no control over anything. Finally, I wrapped my arms around O's neck, asking him through tears if he was okay, if we should go to a hospital, but he stoically said, "I'm okay. It looks worse than it is." O was always and is to this day the most mellow, level, peaceful, spiritual, kindest person I've ever known. It hurts even now thinking what he had to endure. And the thought of what would have or could have happened if those guys managed to get to us girls is absolutely horrifying. Why would anyone do that to 3 18-year-old kids is beyond my ability to comprehend. To this day, this is the worst, unprovoked, terrifying thing that has happened in my life. It took me a long time, years, to be able to go out after sundown. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have a true scary story that you'd like to hear narrated, please email unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Make sure you hit that notification button for every time that I upload. And you can also find me in podcast format on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. I'm all over the place. Follow me on social media. All the links to that are in the description below, as is the image, video, and music credits for this video. Check those people out as well. Everybody, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.